If you're going to build something from nothing, you've got to know what really works. I took a $1,000 loan and built a $5 billion business, and now I make smart investments in new businesses on Shark Tank. This is Barbara Corcoran, and you're listening to Business Unusual, presented by On Deck Business Loans. You might be happy or sad to hear that we have what people mistakenly call Mr. Wonderful here with us today. Mr. Wonderful, welcome.
Thank you, Barbara. And there's no mistake. I am truly Mr. Wonderful because it's true.
All right, I got a few questions that you haven't been asked before. I'm dying to hear. Number one, what were you like as a kid? Take me back to little 5-year-old Kevin. What were you like?
Well, I was very dyslexic. I had a lot of problems, math and reading skills. If you're dyslexic, I was failing school like crazy. My mother was very concerned. It was very stressful for her. And she was getting divorced at the same time, so a lot of stress. And she found a woman named Marjorie Golick and Sam Rabinovich at that age, 5 to 7, that's how old I was. They were doing experimental work with dyslexic kids. They had a gaggle of them. They had like 20 of them. And they're trying some very experimental stuff in a special school, and for me it worked. And so I'm very thankful for her, but those were very tough times because when you're falling behind in math and reading, as you can imagine.
Your ego goes with it.
Yes, and what Rabinovich and Golick said to the class of 20 is, you're all here because you actually have superpowers. And we have to separate you from the general population because you're so powerful. It was really great.
What a great position.
It was a great idea. It really, who else can read backwards, upside down in a mirror? Only unless you had superpowers, which I can still do.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and so that is...
But you were in that school, Kevin, from all the way through 8th grade?
No, what happens is you stay in school because that's the law, but then you spend 4 hours a day in the super class.
On top of your regular school schedule.
On top of that, so you leave school at 3:30 and then you stay there till 7:30, but by the time you're in the program, you want to go there because it's a place you feel normal because everybody else has dyslexia. Everybody's walking around bouncing into the walls. But it works because we did trampolines and we did building block stuff. And in the end, and I learned later in life, if you think about people like the man who developed JetBlue, he was dyslexic.
Phenomenal
Damon John, that
systems
we
guy.
work with on Shark Tank, dyslexic. There's lots of dyslexic people. It doesn't have to retard success. It just makes you do things differently.
You know, I did a survey of all the entrepreneurs that are most successful that I invested in on Shark Tank and asked them that simple question, were you a good student in school or did you struggle severely? And 2 out of 3 were dyslexic in school. I happen to think it's a mark of a great dyslexic. If they could be an entrepreneur, if you have that dyslexic background, you got a good shot at winning.
It could be. It also could be that you figured out that you have to try even harder and that it gives you motivation later in life to do other things. I've always felt that an education is not a prerequisite for success in business. It's difficult to say that when you're teaching a class of people in business school, but I often, say to them, look, you don't know what's going to happen to you when you leave here. It's a nice, warm environment to be in Harvard Business School. But wait till the real world gets a hold of you. It's going to chew you up like hamburger, and then you'll realize this is just the starting point.
But what do you think about somebody who comes out of a really good school with a sophisticated education like Harvard or any of the good schools? What do you think is lacking? What doesn't apply to real world specifically?
I think the major benefit, if we start from that side of the equation, is that the relationships you form there are for life, and these people are going to go and do certain things, and a third of the class is going to be very successful, and it's great to know them. They'll always know you. The downside is I find that the environment that they're in doesn't have anything that's street savvy to it. It's a case study about, growing your market share in China for a $1 billion company. It's not, how do I stay in business and make payroll on Thursday, which is what happens when you do a startup when you get out. They don't teach enough about starting companies, I feel. They teach more about managing existing ones.
And managing successful ones.
Yeah, and so, that's a criticism, but I still teach at those schools because I think it's really invigorating. But on the other hand, I try and teach street smarts. But my whole point is if you look at success, and I don't care what generation you look at, it could be from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, more than half of the people didn't even have a high school education. So, if you don't go to and finish college, doesn't mean you can't be very successful in learning.
I don't know if you know this statistic. I was reading it the other day. I was shocked. 2 out of 3 businesses started in the United States up till today is started by a first-generation immigrant.
Yeah.
Without a college education.
Because they have the fear in them about what it's...
And they also have the need.
The need and the fear, and they have to put bread on the table for their family.
They also have the work ethic.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I think that's what made America great in the first place, the big melting pot.
But that's nothing has changed.
Nothing's changed. And so there's nothing more that affects a family almost like a disease than entitlement. If you tell your children they have no risk, they never launch. If they think that they never have to work, they won't. And that's why I've told my kids they get nothing. And they're just starting to figure that out now, and they're not that excited about it.
But how do you create value when you raise affluent children, as we both have, where they have that same hunger that we had as kids trying to prove something? How do you instill that hunger?
Well, I did it with a generational skipping trust that provides from first day of birth to last day of college, and then they get nothing, really.
Well, that sounds like a great plan longer term, but when you've given your kids every expensive vacation, every nice
Well, that
outfit,
is a problem, Barbara. There's no question about it. And you want them to live the lifestyle you're enjoying because you're not going to go back to where you started because you've worked too hard for it. I mean, that is a huge issue. But what happens is the kids eventually in their 20s leave home, and then they go live in some rat hole when they're in college. And
sometimes.
Mine are, and they're having to work and pay their own rent and stuff, and they're whining about it.
But they still go on your luxury vacations with the family.
Yeah, but they don't always get those anymore because they have to work. They only get 2 weeks off. They have real jobs now. They're out in the real world, and they're realizing, wow, this is not easy. And I think it's great on them, and now they should be motivated to go and do better. But Daddy can't help them. They're out of college now. It's over.
So you don't think you spoiled your kids raising them because of your affluence?
I didn't, but my wife did. You can blame her.
Of course, somebody's got to spoil a child.
Sure,
every
and my wife is still sneaking purses to my daughter. I see them on the credit card bill all the time, and I'm against it.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think the dyslexia scarred you for life? Does it make you try harder? Does it make you prepare better? What has been its long-term effect?
It probably has some impact. I don't really know because it's hard to dissect your career. I mean, I think back on the things that really worked for me and the failures I've had, and some of the more successful deals were ones I didn't anticipate would work, and the ones I thought for sure would be great went to zero. And I think it's all part of the serendipitous nature of life. I have a lot of different things I try at the same time. I'll never retire. I like working, and I have a lot of different things, and they don't always work. And I always wonder after the ones that work, I say, what is it about that one that made it different from the one I lost all that money in? Mm-hmm. And there is no answer.
But you're talking about not things you started yourself, but things you invest in.
Well, there's some businesses where I'm a 51% or 50% owner. I consider myself to be an operator in those businesses because those are generally very big investments for me in the millions. And the reason they're big is I own 50% of them. I don't do things 100% on my own. I like having partners.
You know why that is, right?
Why?
Because you like the attention. You thrive on people around you.
No, I just like to have, augment my weaknesses with somebody that's better at something. And so, my
fair.
biggest business now, currently of my portfolio, including all the Shark Tank deals, because you know what those are like. Mm-hmm. But my biggest deal right now is something called O Shares.
I've been hearing you promote that like crazy.
Well,
you don't
it
think
now
I'm gonna
has
fall for this, do you?
$830 million in it, which is a lot of money, Barbara. And I started that from scratch 36 months ago. So it's on its way to $1 billion of assets.
I knew I should have married you. Damn, I missed that
my
one.
My point is I own 50% of that. I work hard on it every day. I enjoy the work. It's ETFs, exchange traded funds. It's like a mutual fund company, except the new mutual funds are now ETFs. And so that's what I do for at least 20% of my day every day, because that's a lot of money. And I want that one to be successful. And then I've got all my Shark Tank companies and all the stuff I do in financial literacy, and, I'm no different than you are. You're a sharkette.
I'm going to move away from business because I've got good, quick questions for you. Ready?
Okay.
Your first kiss, 2 lines or less. These are the things that people don't know about. I'm not talking about kissing me on Shark Tank. Your first kiss.
Anne Beckwith. I was on the island of Cyprus.
I'm looking her up. I'm going to ask her what kind of kissing you were.
I was spectacular. She was... Anne Beckwith was her name. I was really hot for her. I don't think I was more than 11 years old. Maybe I was 10. Maybe I was 9.
Was she taller than you?
Yeah.
You had to stand on a ladder?
She was a bombshell blonde from Texas.
Did she like it? She
I
never came back.
Something? I think I affected her for the rest of her life.
I'm sure.
Because no one could ever match that first
my
kiss.
God. All right. The first thing you lied to your mother about.
Oh, what would that have been? Probably drinking a beer. I bet you that's what it was.
And how old were you then?
Probably 10.
You didn't get caught?
No.
Did you get drunk?
Yeah.
Did you do drugs?
No.
Did you lie to your dad?
No, I never did drugs. Drugs scared me because I had friends that ran into trouble with drugs. And, if you're not on drugs and you see someone that is, It's pretty weird. And they were hard drugs. They were taking really crazy stuff. And it was in high school. And that is actually what put the fear of drugs into me. I don't do any drugs. I take great wine. That's my drug. I make my own wine now. Very fine wines.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
It's some of the best wine in America, Barbara.
By
the
the
way,
way,
it just got listed today in the state of Pennsylvania.
Oh, what a status kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
the number
yeah.
one wine selling on QVC. You can get it in both those places.
Okay. I'd like to get a free case, but of course I've been dropping hints about that. You never send me even a lousy bottle. Your first big personal mistake, not business. We all know about your business follies.
Probably lying to my girlfriend. It turns out in relationships, it's better to tell the truth, even though when you are telling it, it seems horrible. But you can get over that versus getting caught lying.
What were you lying about?
Probably being with another woman.
Of course, that's what all men lie about.
Yeah, and it's actually, believe it or not, now that I've understood how this all works, it's better to tell the truth about that too.
Are you more like your mother or your father?
Definitely like my mother, I think.
I thought you told me at one point that you learned everything about business from your father.
You know, as I answer it, you see, my first dad was an Irish salesman, and I think I have some of those attributes. Although he was only 37, I was 7 when he died. So it's hard to really see, you know, I didn't have as much time with him. But actually, the more I think about it, maybe I inherited some of that Irish salesman stuff.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt.
And
You don't
so-
look Irish, but you sure sound it.
So at the end of the day, it's a mix of both. My mother was very kind and very,
Well, you didn't inherit that.
no, she was very matriarchal in terms of how she
You
ran the
didn't
family.
inherit that.
But so maybe I got a lot of my father in me. Maybe that's true.
No, but what about your mother do you have in you?
Well, she was very stubborn in the sense that she made sure she got what she wanted, and she was willing to work very hard to get it. She died a very wealthy woman, but she kept a secret account from both of her husbands.
But how did she make her money? I didn't know she had worked.
What she did was, this is remarkable, and it actually took me those shares is actually as a result of my mother. She, from the age of 18, would take 10% of any money she was given or made, because she was a working girl her whole life, and invest it in two things. Telco bonds, because she thought people would never cut their phone off. They'd turn their heat off before they cut off their phone. And she bought 21 large dividend-paying stocks on the stock market.
I don't believe that.
And
As a working girl?
A working girl. And after 50 years, that portfolio made her very wealthy. And I went back and did some research. She only bought stocks that paid dividends. Over 70% of the returns in the stock market come from dividends, not appreciating stock prices.
And that is your philosophy, I know.
That's what I learned from looking at her portfolio. This isn't some academic research. This is a real woman who did this for 47 years and became very wealthy.
And it wasn't her livelihood. What was she doing as her livelihood?
Well, she worked for her father, who owned a company called Kitty's Togs that made winter clothing for children at a time in North America where you could be competitive making clothing. And they had a pretty big business for kids' winter clothes. Kitty's Togs, that's what it was called. And my father came over on a boat from Ireland and got a job as a salesperson. That's how she met him. And so she worked for the owner, her father, and Terry, my father, worked for him too. And they all worked in this family business that grew. And then the brother got involved and the other two sisters. They all worked for the father. Her father was Lebanese, came over from Lebanon. And then my dad came over from Ireland. But it goes back to what you talked about earlier, that the ethnic population that made North America, that came over, they were the ones that started all the businesses.
Of course. They hustled. They had nothing to lose, nowhere to go but up.
Right. And that's what happened in my family, too. So everybody worked. So she started getting paid, and she would squirrel away 10%. She taught me to do that, too. She always believed that people buy a lot of crap they don't need. And she's right. If you just look through a woman's closet or a man's and look at all the crap they bought in clothing they don't wear, that's all wasted money.
Yeah, but that's what kept her family business in business.
Yeah, but
that
she
exact
would,
crap.
you know what happened after she died? The women in the family went into a cat fight over her clothes. She would save up and buy a $9,000 Chanel jacket.
Kind of like what you do today.
Yeah, because
you're in your Tom Ford suits. How many of those suits do you own?
Look, I have 25 of these suits, and I look spectacular in them, Barbara. But they're the
Oh, my
same.
God.
Every one of them's the same. I have a uniform. I learned it's much easier to get up and put on the same black tie, white shirt, black suit.
Yeah, but you don't
Prada
care about the rest of us who are so bored with the way you look.
You know, I just look at myself in the mirror and I wink every morning. Hey, good looking.
Kevin, when did you lose your hair?
I lost my hair when I was about 22.
Were
and
you shocked?
I was amazed. I was amazed. I couldn't believe it was happening to me, and it really affects a guy. And then today, I would never change my look. I wouldn't want my hair back.
Oh, I don't believe you.
No, I'd be happy.
If there was a miracle growth serum, you would put it on that head.
I don't think so. My brand is that beautiful bald head.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I, for one, enjoy shining your head on the Shark Tank set all the time. And you really are such a good sport about it.
Barbara, it's the way I was meant to look. I don't give a shit, I mean, I think there's all kinds of things to try and keep your hair that don't work. I think it's clear now when you look at all around bald guys, nothing works.
What was your first impression the first day you were on the Shark Tank set? What did you think about the show? Did you think it would go 10 years?
No. I thought this is crazy. But
you had that great experience in Canada, similar show, same kind of routine.
Well, the show actually started in England, where it's been on for 17 years. So we should here's what I learned about Shark Tank, called Dragon's Den in other countries. In Britain, nobody watched it for 3 years. Then it went geometric. In Canada, nobody watched it for 3 years.
And I remember on the second year on Shark Tank, you were telling us next year's our year. Yeah. Everybody's going to watch it, and I didn't believe you.
And it happened.
It's exactly what happened.
Something about that show format gets into the viewer's mind, and they start coming at it. And I think it needs to find its audience. But Shark Tank's been going into its second decade, Barbara. Nobody thought that would happen.
What was your impression about Damon John the first day on the set?
I said, Damon, it's great. When did you get out of prison?
Oh, no, you've used that joke so many times. On a serious note, what was your first impression?
I liked him. I liked the whole street smart thing, the whole FUBU, selling the stuff on the street.
He was very quiet, I remember that day. Didn't have a lot to say.
Yeah, but, the more his story came out, I realized this guy's a real entrepreneur. I mean, that's what I like about Shark Tank. Everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different path to success. Everybody was an operator. There's no BS. It's just everybody figured it out on their own, and it's all different. Mm-hmm. That's what I like the most.
Mutual respect. What was your impression of not Robert, who you had worked with? How many years were you working already with Robert?
At least 5 years. Before.
What was your impression of Robert when you first met him in Canada?
I've heard the story about rat meat on the boat.
Oh my gosh! Oh my God! I can't hear it one more time. The immigrant story.
Yeah, the immigrant story. I had a boat, a little rat meat, and some rice, and that was it. I mean, I've heard
my
that.
dad, the factory worker. I please stop. Yeah, but did you think he was going to be a successful shark once you came to America?
Yeah, I think there's something. But each shark has some attribute that makes them work, but it also works together.
Yes, it does.
And you don't know the alchemy of television, as I've learned, is an unknown and a very hard science to master. And that's why we're lucky to have Mark Burnett, who didn't let the network tinker with it. I remember in the first 3 years, they were constantly wanting to make changes. And Burnett said, I have final cut. We're leaving everything the way it is because it's going to work.
Well, not entirely true. He brought in Mark Cuban. He brought in Laura Grenier.
Oh, no, but the set, for example, the format, how many women, all of these, there were 2 women, 3 guys, all that stuff was up for grabs in the first 3 years. They were thinking of putting a 6th shark and all that. And Mark said,
we had a 6th shark on set one day. It was terrible.
It was terrible. It was just chaos.
The sink was
so, but the point is that he was the steward of that boat, and he kept it going until it got traction, and now everybody and their dog wants to be a shark.
The first day I met Mark Burnett on the show, and I'm not making this up, he stood in those perfectly tailored blue jeans that fit him meticulously. Maybe he had a $500 shirt on, and he had a little neck, like a scarf that was actually blowing in the wind, and there was no fan around. I'm not making that up. I thought, who is that guy? And then I heard, he's the big boss. He's Mark Burnett. But I thought he was at a central casting. He looked exactly like a movie director.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I think he has become historic in the sense that he's had so many perennial hits, so many shows that have lasted past 7 years, which is a magic number in television. Most shows die between 5 and 7 years. He's seemed to go on forever. I think he captures whatever is the magic about a show like Shark Tank and perpetuates it.
And he gets it fast.
And we just, the show is part of America now. People know what Shark Tank is, and many businesses have been built on it. We've had great successes, catastrophic failures, whatever. But it's a slice of life.
One thing I remember so well about Mark, I don't know if you were impressed with him in the same manner. The night we went to his big, beautiful house in L.A. and had a great dinner. What was that, 3rd, 4th season? Somewhere
Fourth
there?
Season,
Fourth
I remember.
Season, yeah. And remember, all of our big bosses were saying what we should do differently, how we should improve this, what we should do that. And then he was very quiet through the whole night. And he says, I have one piece of advice. Be yourself.
Yeah.
And I remember my shoulders came down. I was making notes on what I should be, getting all this advice from everybody. And he said, be yourself. And I think that was the first time I relaxed in the seat and I started doing a good job.
Well, I've learned television is a medium where people smell bullshit. right away. They
Well
smell
said.
bullshit. They know when
Never
you're...
mind TV. People in general smell bullshit.
Yeah, I mean,
They're smarter than you think.
if you're lying, it comes across. I mean,
Well,
if you're
why do you think you've been able to fool them all these years?
Because there's a reason I'm Mr. Wonderful, Barbara. It's true. I am the only shark that tells the truth. You know, there's a story I like to tell, which is factual. When I was young, I think I was 5 years old, I was flying a kite and I got struck by lightning. And
This is not true, Kevin.
Well, just hear it out.
No, this is a joke.
The DNA was changed in my brain and I can only speak the truth.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure that's true. Oh, God. Yeah.
Okay, that's bullshit, but it's a great story, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's a great story.
Thank you very much.
But why do you think the show works so well?
Well, I think
The essence of it.
I think the different personalities, and you have to admit that after all these years, we don't see those cameras anymore. I certainly don't see them. I'm just in the moment, listening and thinking about what's going on. And if I see a deal I like to compete for it. Because
No kidding.
I have made some money on these deals. Some of them work.
You remember the first couple of years you told me as a new shark, you'll never make any money on these deals.
Well, we didn't because they were crappy deals. And then after year 3, when they got rid of some of the structure that was holding us back, demanding equity and all the rest of that, then we started getting great products.
Yeah, I
and
think so,
since
too.
then, everybody's had their hit, I mean,
Yeah.
Plated for Me and that other one, Groove Book, those turned into big cash.
But don't you think Lori Greniers had more hits than all of us on the show? Single products that she's made millions of dollars on.
And I'm not sure. What I would say is...
I don't know. I'm keeping a score sheet. I don't like what I see, but I'm keeping it.
I look at it saying, who made the most money?
Yeah, there's no way to tell. I'll tell you one thing for
Why?
sure. Every guy on the set lies about how much money they're making.
Well,
the
at
only
least
honest
I can
people
tell
are the
you this.
women.
I had the biggest exit. Nobody's sold a company for $300 million except me.
Yeah, I want to see a balance sheet and see how much of those millions you got.
I got enough. It was pretty good, actually.
I still say Lori Grenier's making more money than you, bar none. Absolutely.
No, I won't admit that because I don't know. I'm like you. Show me the numbers.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I
we'll
don't.
never see
There
the
is no
numbers.
tally. There's no way to know. I mean,
Sure there is. If we all shared our honest numbers, we'd know what we were
that's
doing.
never going to happen, Barbara.
Never happen. Never happen. Nobody's going to tell the truth, that's for sure. What was your impression the day Mark Cuban walked in?
I thought Mark was great too. I mean, he
From
was
the get-go.
Yeah, he was terrific. And the thing is, on your own, any one shark does not carry that show by themselves. You got to have the interaction. You have to have the ebb and flow, and that's what works.
I agree, but I have to also say, I'm not saying this ingenuously, I think you're the king shark that holds it all together.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You need a bad guy.
But I'm like you. I'm sitting there. It's just happening. It happens the way it happens. And if you had asked me, and we started this conversation this way, would we still be doing this a decade later? I'd say not a chance in hell.
But do you remember how engaged the camera guys were the first day on the set? They
Yeah,
were
that was
asking so many
interesting when they
questions.
said at the end of the day, wow, we were watching TV.
They never took their eyes off
That's
us.
what one said. I rarely watch TV.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am watching TV, wondering if the guy's going to get a deal or not. That was probably a good sign.
Oh, it was a very good sign. Because
Yeah,
they've
yeah.
seen it all and they're usually bored.
No, you're right about
But not
that.
on the set. Yeah. How hard are those long days for you? How many hours do we work on that set?
Well, they are hard, and in the afternoons...
But do they seem hard to you?
I'm just, the trouble is, if I see a deal that has no merit and it has no value, and I know I'm not going to invest in it, I just want to take it behind the barn and shoot it.
Oh, that's a lot of deals.
I know, but then again, we're making television. So sometimes the process of getting to the bottom and not doing the deal and finding out why is actually why the show works. What I find so interesting about Shark Tank, above anything else, is how we peel that onion, how there's enough experience on those chairs that no matter what is being presented to us, somebody can smell the bullshit when it's there. And when somebody's lying to you or they're I should say they're representing their possibilities in the brightest possible light.
Of course. Called exaggeration.
And so often that manifests itself in crazy valuations, but often we find out things that they were perhaps not willing to tell us.
And if we don't find it out then, we find it out in the due diligence after
Yeah,
the
but
fact.
I like it when we find it out when we're making the
It's
show.
much more exciting.
Because it is more exciting, and how you're peeling that onion and then boom, oh yes, I have $900,000 worth of debt and I have no sales. That happens, and that just takes the air right out of the room.
Back to Mark just for a second. I remember the day he sat on the set. He sat in his chair and he owned it. And I thought, oh, he's not a guest shark. This guy's not leaving. Remember, he came as a guest shark.
I forgot that actually, but you're
Absolutely.
right. I forgot. It's so long ago, I don't
owned
remember.
that seat.
But that was in year 4, wasn't it?
Yep, that was year 4. And I remember he was spending money as though he had millions to spend. And then I found out he had billions. I didn't feel sorry for him anymore. I thought, there goes a sucker. He's buying everything in sight.
It doesn't matter how much money you have. The probability of success doesn't change. You still have to make the right decisions. And all of us have had dogs. You know
we've
that.
had enough dogs, no doubt about it. But you
So
only need
I don't
a
care
few really
who
big
you
winners.
are. You can be so optimistic. You write that $500,000 check and then boom, laka, laka, laka.
We'll continue with my conversation with Mr. Wonderful in just a minute. You're listening to Business Unusual, presented by On Deck Business Loans. Here's a company all business owners should know about: On Deck Business Loans. On Deck delivers financing for small business owners in as little as 24 hours, with term loans up to $500,000 and lines of credit up to $100,000. Their average loan is about $57,000. On Deck products are always tailored to your specific business need, with lots of loan and payback options. Their simple process saves you time, and because they have less strict requirements than the banks, they approve many different businesses and do it faster than traditional lenders. I've known the gang at On Deck for years now, and I can tell you they're the real deal. On Deck has lent over $10 billion to more than 80,000 small business owners. Thousands of them have reviewed On Deck, giving them a 9.8 out of 10 rating on Trustpilot and an A+ grade with the Better Business Bureau. So make your way over to ondeck.com/Barbara for a free consultation with a small business loan specialist to find out exactly which loan best suits your company. Ondeck.com/Barbara. And now back to my chat with Kevin. Do you love your entrepreneurs as much now as you did in year 1, 2, and 3?
I've learned a lot about what the telltale signs are of success in the first year. I can really now know with all of these, this year alone, I've got 8 that I've already...
And how many do you think are going to be successful?
I've only had them for a few months, right? I've got 6 months, and I think I have 2 that are going to be monsters, big ones.
Monsters in a good way.
In a good way, yeah, in a good way.
And what's
one of the
the
reasons is the stuff is selling. You know what I mean? It took off on the show, and then it kept going.
Yeah, but a lot takes off on the show, and 6 months later they hit their first obstacle and nothing works out.
It's been since June, Barbara, and they continue to grow. So some things are happening there that I like. And also they're stick-to-itive people, and they're...
That's the key.
The ones for me, it's all the women. All my women deals are the ones that are making me money.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't say that. I'd say most of my deals are men for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got a lot of
money.
successful women in my mix. You remember that one honey fund that does wedding registry?
I remember it very well. You
That
promote
thing-
it constantly.
She is now running the back office for Target.
I believe it.
Like, that's a lot.
She's a very capable young
Yeah,
woman.
she's a beast. She's an absolute beast. And so that business originates about $600 million.
I'm not going to let you sit here and promote a business that I don't
Well, you know
own.
what I
don't
want
like
to
it one
promote?
bit.
And I just thought of this.
No, we've run out of time.
No,
I'm
my
sorry.
podcast. You got to give me a shout out.
Of course, let's hear it.
It's
Let's
called
hear the
Ask
shout out.
Mr. Wonderful,
What a great name.
and it's going to kick your hiney.
I don't know. We're going to put a bet today. We're
Well, you
in
know
a
what?
race.
You got to come on my podcast,
We're in a race
Barbara.
for listeners.
No, listen, I'm just starting out. I'm just trying to scratch a living in this.
I'm not going to help you on your podcast.
But you're coming
I
on
feel
my
competitive.
podcast, are
I'm
you
not
not?
coming on your
Yes,
podcast.
you are.
I'm not coming. I'm not home.
Everybody,
Nope,
Barbara
nope.
Corcoran will be
I am
on
not
Ask
coming
Mr.
on-
Wonderful.
I am not coming on your podcast, and I will run circles around you with mine.
And I'll let you ask me a question. That's
okay,
the special
fair.
magic.
But how do you know an entrepreneur is going to be a loser? I shouldn't say a loser. I don't mean to label it that way, but you're going to lose your money.
They don't respect the money. You write them the check. Sometimes it's, recently I've been putting big ones out, $400,000, $450,000, and then all of a sudden it's gone 3 months later.
On things you don't want them to spend it on?
Well, they claim it's the right expenditure, but in the end, all I care about is how am I going to get it back?
Yeah, but why would you just let them go along and blow that amount of money? I would
Well,
have more
in the
control.
case where I wrote the 450, I started with 100, and they got me that back. Then I gave them 250, they got me that back. And the business is growing, so maybe I shouldn't be that concerned. Then I gave them 450.
Wow.
And I'm funding, and it's cash flowing. Like they're actually, it's
Yeah,
working.
but that's what credit lines are for. Why do you have to fund
Well,
them?
it is a form of credit line because what I did on this last big round was I took more equity and I put it out. I said if it's not paid back in 6 months, it turns into debt. So it becomes
That's nice, but you have to be able to collect on debt with a
yeah,
viable
but the
business.
company has sales and it's got assets. So you know my guy Alex. He structures these things.
He structures a deal. Yeah, he's a smart guy.
He's a smart guy. So he brought this deal to me. He said, "I want you to write a check for $450." These guys said, "Alex, that's crazy. Why?" He said, "Well, look, everything's working. They're selling a lot of stuff, and they're good guys, and they need $450. I said, okay, do it.
If my Mike had come to me with that proposal, I would have said, great idea, get a credit line. I don't want to be that exposed.
Well, you know, every deal's different, but in this case, I'm feeling, you know, who knows? But at the end of the day, the ones that are successful are myopically focused on their businesses. They seem to live and breathe their business. What I love getting, Barbara, I don't know if you have this for your deals, I like a monthly letter, no more than 3 paragraphs. That's all I want from my entrepreneurs.
I like a conversation. I think you learn more in a quick conversation than
But
you learn
if the
any
letter
other communication.
gives me problems, then I call them up, say, let's talk for a few minutes.
Makes sense.
So what I like is I like on my desk at the end of each month my synopsis, and I spend a morning reading. I only want 3 paragraphs. Do not send me more than 3 paragraphs. I'm not going to read it. But tell me what happened in the last month, and do this as for your own staff. What was good, what was bad? It's a very short period of time.
But they don't present you with what their problems are.
No, they do. I don't want good
That's
news. I
what's-
already know the good news. Just
Yeah.
give me the problems.
That's the meat, of course.
You know, it's just like I need help doing this, I need help doing that. And sometimes I'll find a situation where I can fix that by just making a phone call, and I will. One of my companies needs to connect with the CEO of a toy company. I can make that happen in 2 minutes.
Oh, you've been talking about your toy company making it happen forever for
and
10
you know,
years.
I'm very
actually.
good at it. But
I'm
I also
sure.
I also got one of my companies needed to get into Benjilock needed Walmart. We made that happen.
Benchmark, what an oddball deal that was. My
Wasn't that
God.
crazy?
The most shocking day on TV for mine.
And you know how much money I'm going to make on that one? It's going to be good.
I don't want to hear it because he chose you over me and I didn't
Yeah,
like
Barbara,
it one
you-
bit.
you
Hey,
know.
we all wanted him. He chose you. I still think he's out of his mind. Let's switch subjects. What was your first house like?
I bought my first house for $110,000 when I wasn't even making $10,000 a year.
Crazy. Why would
It
you
was
do
crazy, and I remember I had postpartum depression. I gave birth to a house and I was depressed. After I bought it, I thought, what have I done to myself? But it ended up being one of the best.
You were
investments.
single at the time?
I was.
Yeah.
And what I did is I rented all the rooms to my friends, and
How'd you come up with the money?
I basically borrowed $10,000 for the bank thought it was equity, but I actually had a loan for the equity part too.
You don't have
I
to
had
tell
no
them
money.
that. Yeah.
So I bought the place and I immediately rented out every single room, including the basement.
You hustler, you.
Yeah, and to all my friends, and I made them pay their rent every week.
This
'cause
was
I had no
in
money.
college?
It was just out of college, right out of college. And then what happened was real estate prices started going up. Mm-hmm. And then I realized, oh, this works. My house is worth 20% more after a year, and I've been paying off the mortgage, and I raised
Or you
everybody's...
had them paying off the
Well, I
mortgage.
did, and I raised their rent. And
How to make friends. That's why you don't have friends today. That
no,
kind of a
there's-
gimmick, yeah.
And I used to say, look, the benefit of living here is every Saturday night we're going to have an investment dating party where we just invite a whole bunch of girls over, and they all
What a
came.
hot house.
And it was a great party. We had so much fun. It was fantastic.
And you eventually sold that house at a profit truthfully, or you tore it down. Right
I
to the
sold that
foundation.
house 7 years later for $1.2 million, and I bought it for $110,000.
I don't believe you. I'm going to check that, dude.
No, it's true. It's a true
and where
story.
was this house? This
It
mystery
was
house.
it was in a district called Little Italy in Toronto, Canada, and it was a very ethnic area, and I was very comfortable living there because I'd grown up in the Mediterranean. And then all of a sudden, it became very chic. It became the hot place to live because it was downtown.
Kind of like our downtown. Same
Yeah,
thing
and
happened.
it got really hot. And then all these little restaurants started opening, and then all these boutiques. And then a rock star from, his name was Bruce Cockburn, who was a very famous folk singer, moved in next door. And the street was called Shaw Street. It became the hottest street in the hottest area. And some guy came to me and said, I'll buy your house for $1 million. I said, never, not, because I was right across from a park. I had a park across from me that used to be where drug dealers operated. But by the time it became chic.
baby carriages.
It was
yeah.
baby carriages, right. I said, for $1.2 million, and I'll do the deal. And that's what happened.
What'd you do with that money?
I started my first company with it called Special Event Television.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. And you owe it all to real estate. One house.
Well,
you
that's a
bought.
good point. It's true. My biggest
And
first
yet
return.
you're always on the road saying, don't buy, rent,
No,
rent,
but you know
rent.
something, Barbara? The second company, Special Event Television, three of us started it, and we sold that 3 years later. That owned Bobby Orr and the Hockey Legends. It owned Don Cherry's Grapevine. They were television formats. I didn't even know what television format was, and I owned it because we created this show. And we were shooting it in Boston. I was doing all the intermission work for the hockey broadcasts every Saturday. I would shoot the shows for the intermissions on
I
Saturdays.
can't picture you doing that.
It was crazy.
With
And
hair on your head, no doubt.
I had hair on my head, but I was going all over the place. I was a cameraman, a soundman, an editor. I still edit stuff today, but now you don't do it on a Steamback anymore. You do it electronically. But that company was purchased for the rights of the formats, and then I started the software company that eventually became the learning
What
company.
did you sell that first company for?
$9 million.
Really? But that company, again, you started with the $1 million you made on that house.
$1.2 million, yeah.
Then why are you going around telling the whole world, don't buy, rent?
No,
I hear you say it all the time.
But the trouble is, if you can't afford the debt...
You couldn't afford the debt. You found some other suckers to pay
Barbara,
for it.
when people blow their brains out in real estate, and you know this, is because they over-lever. They own too much real estate. I only owned the house I was living in, and I was running a little business out of the basement, and I renting all the rooms to all my friends. I mean, that place was like some sort of college dorm for a while.
That's exactly what it was.
It was
A
like
booking
10
joint.
people in there, you know? But everybody's paying me $250 a week, and I was living off that. That's how I was eating. If somebody didn't pay me rent, I starve. I lost weight. So I was really kind of a slum landlord, sort of like you if you think about it.
Oh, yeah, just like me. I'm hardly a slum landlord. I spoil my tenants. They're like my children.
How many tenants do you have now?
Probably maybe 65, 70.
It's crazy. You know
I just
them all?
bought a new building.
Do you
Now
know
I have
them all?
30 more. Of course I don't know them all. I know their checks.
But you know that you have managers manage the buildings, right?
I have very good managers, but I take care of my buildings. You take care of your tenants, they take care of you back. That's what I've learned. Like all
that
the
makes
rest
sense
of life.
to me. So you make sure they have a good entrance. You paint the
Doll
places,
it up,
all that
make it
stuff.
look good. You treat them well. You answer their complaints. Sometimes
They're
I don't want
renting
to.
these places.
Of course.
Yeah,
you know what's great about tenants renting a place? You could keep remortgaging your property again and again and again, taking cash out. And then as the rents go up, the tenants can afford the rent. And so you're still making tons of money as you go.
You get capital returns and you get income.
Oh, it's not just the income. You could remortgage. You get chunks of cash out
What
without
could
paying
go
taxes.
wrong? What could go wrong in real estate? In New
You
York?
could have a recession, but as long as you don't overcharge on your rents, I always factor that in, that prices could drop 20%, and it's still a good building and still can pay the mortgage. Like you said earlier, don't over leverage.
So if you assume when you model, you pencil it out, that the 20% decline could happen over a 3 or 4 year period.
Yeah, you take a lesser mortgage than the building could actually support.
So you put more equity into the building.
You do, yeah, eventually, or you leave more equity in without mortgaging out quite as much.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So
have you bought real estate for investment over time?
I have, and I actually have about 35% of my portfolio in real estate, but they're all income-producing properties like cold storage facilities.
So it's things you invest in, not things that you manage, right?
Yes, well, those facilities, I actually did some construction loan financing. I built some and I bought some, and I built a portfolio and then a REIT. Again, 3 partners.
You never talk about this. I wish you'd promote
Yeah, no,
real
I
estate.
did it, and I learned something very important. On the very first construction financing, because we were new into that industry, the bank made us sign personal guarantees for the first building to prove we could do it and stabilize it within 36 months. That was the deal. They'd lend the money to build it. This was a cold storage facility. And then after it was stabilized, they would refinance it. But during the unstabilized period, they wanted personal guarantees. Now, I had never given a personal guarantee before.
Hard to do it without it.
And that was 2007. Then 2008 came. Whoa, that scared the living you-know-what out of me.
Because you did give a personal guarantee.
We did.
Very
and,
hard to get funding without it,
but,
truly.
But it taught me an important lesson, because you should give personal guarantees as if you can afford to lose them. That is the only way.
That wouldn't cover most of us.
I know, but it really was a scary thing, because there was a couple of weeks in that period where, we were really soberly looking at it saying, maybe we got to take the hit on this because we're not sure what the economy is going to do. But we stuck it out. We continued to pay. It made the stabilization an extra 12 months, so we had to wait 4 years. But we sold that building for a massive profit coming out of the recession.
Good for you.
Yeah, it was amazing. But I learned my lesson about leverage in real estate. But what I like about real estate that I own now, they're all income-producing properties. I did a hotel in Boston, which was a crazy experience, a boutique hotel. Pros and cons to that. The real estate building value was worth more than the hotel
Of course,
was.
which is true of most boutique hotels.
Yeah, and so that's what saved our Heine. Was not we were losing money operating the hotel, and then somebody
course.
just came out and said, "I want that facility."
Of course. You were saved by the bell, so to speak.
Saved by because we were losing a lot.
Yeah.
And-
Here's an interesting story that just happened to me last week. I'm buying a 35-unit building.
Yeah.
Going for the financing, giving the true rent roll, exactly what it is. The building could easily support a mortgage of up to 80%. And the bankers would not believe me that was the real rent roll. They asked me how much I had padded it. I'm like, that's the real rent roll.
You mean it was
how
that
much did
high?
you pad it? They wanted it padded. They wanted to show a higher debt to value ratio, and they would not take it on face value. I went to 3 different banks. Everybody wanted the numbers padded. I'd never
So
experienced that
basically,
before.
they wanted you to lie to them?
Basically, yes. I'm
crazy.
like, this is how it goes. It's called hard money lenders. It's kind of like legal mafia.
And you were just trying to negotiate a mortgage, right?
All I wanted was a regular mortgage based on real numbers, and I had a hard time being truthful. I finally found a lender that wanted the truth, but everyone I went to wanted to hear a story.
And what can you get mortgages for now? 6%?
No, not on not an investment property. It's more like 7, 7.5, 7 3/8.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's not cheap anymore.
Not cheap, but if you have a good property, it makes sense. Yeah, but I was just surprised at the lack of honesty in the whole process. I thought I had seen and heard it all. I'm like, you got to be kidding. It took me a while to catch on as to what they were looking for. These are respectable banks. I was
Is there
like
any
shocked.
restrictions on how fast you can pay that mortgage back?
No. Mm-mm. I mean,
there's no
there's prepayment penalties, of course, but you don't want to rush to pay a mortgage back quickly.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Unless
but
you
if
sell.
Yeah, if you
Unless
wanted
you
to.
sell, then it comes due. Okay,
that's
what's your
interesting.
first car, Kevin?
My first
Very
car-
first car that you paid for.
Was a 2002 red BMW used that I ran for almost a decade. I just kept good. I remember that
10
red,
years? I can't picture you hanging on to a
It
woman
was
for
a
10
nine-
years,
no,
never
it was a
been a
19
car.
It was a 1969 2002 red BMW. And when I brought it to a dealer once, he said, "Why is this car not given a chance to go and die in peace? Why do you make it stay alive like
Because
this?"
you loved it, I'm sure.
And I said, "I love this car. Can you put a new transmission?" And he said, "You've already put 2 transmissions through this thing." I said, "Can you do a third?" He said, "No. This is ridiculous. Why don't you buy a new car from us?" I said, "No, I want to keep this car." So I basically replaced it all. It was a wonderful car.
What kind of car do you drive now?
You know, the funny thing, Barbara, I don't drive cars anymore. Why? I'm in the wine business. I'm always drinking wine. And so I drink wine at
I've
lunch.
seen you on many sober nights. You didn't drink wine with me today, and I offered you some.
No, I know, not today, but I know probably tonight I'll have a glass because I'm always trying different wines. I have a 10-year-old Porsche 911. I gave up my lease on my beautiful brand new diesel Mercedes SUV because it had 1,000 miles on it after a year. I only drove it 1,000 miles.
The fun part was buying it, I think.
It was dumb to even have that because I Uber everything and I have drivers and stuff.
Well, if it was a new car, you lost money on selling it. That's
I did.
for sure.
No, I leased it, and they said you've lost money for sure because you never used it. And I said, well, why would I want to lose money a second term? Because I had it for 24 months. When you drink, you should never drive. I mean that seriously, so I never do.
Mm-hmm.
And I do drink wine. I'm drinking wine all the time.
All right, I'm going to switch to your wife, Linda.
Yes.
Linda is so rock solid. I would have never pictured that she would marry someone like you. Honestly, she could have done so much better than you. What is it about Linda that falls in love with a guy named Kevin?
Well,
I don't get it.
You have to remember that when I married Linda, I had nothing. We couldn't even afford anything except pizza at our wedding. We had
And
no
even
money.
more, it begs the question, why would she marry you?
Well, because she saw potential, Barbara. There's no question about it. I mean, who knows why you fall in love anyways and what your expectations are for what your life's going to be like. It's serendipitous. But the one thing I know about her versus all the other women that could have been in my life or, might have been in my life, et cetera.
Might have been the mother of your kids.
Right. Is that she's a great mother, so she raised great children when I wasn't around to be a father because I was running all around the world with the learning company for 6 years. That was really time consuming. And secondly, she knew me when I had no money. So I know that she's interested in other things besides my money. Look at it that way.
Well
That's
said.
the way.
You can trust that.
I can, and she's not. It's a funny thing. She's very much like my mother. She likes to buy very nice things, but not a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the stuff she ends up investing in. She just redid our Boston place, and it's beautiful. It's my favorite home now. And every piece is one of a kind and beautiful. And I was really moaning about what I was paying for when I paid for it, but now I look at it and say, wow, this is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot to be said for being selective on what you acquire in your life, and don't buy a lot of crap.
It's even more to be said for being selective on who you marry in your life.
Yeah, so that's worked out. And we've had our ups and downs. It's a 30-year marriage. Everybody that's been married that long knows. And we were separated for a while, too, but we came back together again. We have a family, and I'm very appreciative of all the crap she has to put up with, even now.
What do you think is the number one thing in choosing a spouse?
I actually think, when I look at all my friends, of which 50% have gone through divorce, is understanding that you're both in alignment on the way you see yourselves in life. I mean, if you have 50% of marriages fail not because of infidelity, because of financial stress. That's what happens. People outspend their partner, or they don't treat their partner fairly in the financial sense.
You really believe that?
I do.
For example, I don't get that.
Yeah. Well, think about it this way. If you define your life around only money, you're going to fail for sure.
But you define everything about money.
But I'm saying when you're talking about a family, if you don't do financial due diligence on your partner and she ends up or he ends up being somebody that's completely inconsistent with you on your financial objectives, you're going to fail in 5 years.
So, for example, if you married someone who's a wild spender and you really want to build a nest egg and wait till later,
Right.
that's a problem.
Because, today I spend a lot of time in this financial literacy initiative I have where I teach in colleges. They're 21 to 25-year-olds, and they're just going through the beginning of dealing with debt from college debt and then getting married and being engaged and having children. You can't believe how much of the dialogue's around money. Like, it's just, they talk about relationships for about 2 minutes, and then everything else is, what about my debt? How do I get a house? How much are these kids going to cost me? It's all money stress. And these are kids that have just finished college and, are struggling sometimes to get jobs. And even when they have jobs, they realize it's not enough.
So how do you suggest that a young person today vet that out on someone they think would make a great life partner?
If you're in a third date with somebody, that means both sides are interested. If you're going through the third date, it's time to start talking about money, about what you think the future looks like. And I'll tell you why that works when I tell men this story. If you're bringing that topic up with a woman, she knows that you're really interested.
Of course.
And if she's interested in you, that's self-reinforcement. That's going to tighten up the relationship in many ways, that you're actually thinking about what you're going to look like together in fighting the world together and a nest egg together and building a family. That's powerful romantic stuff, even though it's money.
Doesn't sound romantic.
It is romantic. I've talked to many women that said what really got me about this guy is how serious he was after the third date about picturing us together in a union. And it's very powerful when that, because you're only on your third date, and when all of a sudden you're putting those kind of vibes out, magic can happen if it's reciprocal. Most people do not go out a third time, Barbara, if they're not interested. They'll just find a reason to wash their hair that night instead.
Absolutely true. I recently met a doctor, and he said he thought the most important question a man should ask about his future wife is, would I hire her to watch my children? I thought, that's ridiculous. The
Actually,
more I
that's
thought
pretty
about
good.
it, I thought, that's a great line, because a lot of men would say no.
It is pretty interesting you bring that up, because it's hard to determine whether someone will be a good mother before they become one. But that ends up being another big part of stress. I mean, I can't imagine being home with 2 toddlers, what that's like. I mean, that in itself is running a business. It's just, it's a nightmare in some ways, but it's your family in another. And so you got to think of it that way. You got to be the provider. You got to pay for that stuff. That's where the stress comes in, is when you've got 2 kids or 3 kids and you don't have enough money to afford them. And you're trying to deal with the mortgage and the student debt and all that stuff. I meet these
But
kids
that's
now.
part of almost every marriage.
Yeah, I know, but it puts a lot of stress. They stop going out. They haven't been on a date in 2 years. They can't afford it.
No
They're
fun.
never separated from their kids. It's very stressful, and I understand it, and I try and give my guidance to it. But you have to find a little time to be away from those kids. You got to hire a babysitter once a week, otherwise you just drive yourself nuts. And you're still being a good parent doing that. I got to be cognizant of my time here.
One
Barbara.
last question.
Okay.
The last question is, what do you think of me?
Well,
That's enough. Thank you very much for coming today.
Well, I've been working with you for 10 years, Barbara, and I don't think that you're going to change.
I don't think so either.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think you will either.
No, I think that's true.
We're
But
not meant for
I
one
certainly
another.
I'm interested in how you assess situations, including business opportunities like Shark Tank, because you do not do it the way I do. That's
Not
for
at
sure.
all. We couldn't be more diametrically opposed.
You're absolutely right. And so when I tell people this joke that I want you to hear, and I want your listening
You're
audience
not going to
hear-
do it again.
Yes, I have to, because
Oh, God,
it's
here we
so
go.
great. People always ask me, it happens all the time. What's Barbara like? I could be in an audience with 9,000 people in the room, and they're out with those microphones in the middle of the audience. I can't even see them. What's Barbara like? And I always say, I'll tell you about Barbara. The only reason she gets around in New York anymore is I bought her a new broom. It works every time. The whole
God.
crowd goes nuts, and they just love it.
Oh, we're going to end it here. Thank you, Mr. Wonderful, for coming. And right here, chop.
Oh, that was great. Thanks.
You've been listening to Business Unusual with me, Barbara Corcoran, presented by On Deck Business Loans. Come back next week to hear more steps and missteps I took on the path to success on Business Unusual. Business Unusual is part of the iHeartRadio Podcast Network. Be sure to follow Business Unusual on iHeartRadio or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.